Hi, I'm Kat the Farmer, and I want to show you how I grew Belgian endive on my farmlet. Belgian endive is a type of green that grows in the field and it looks like a dandelion, and then you uproot it and grow it again in total darkness to create a delicately flavored type of salad green. So this was my first season growing it, and I'd love to show you what I tried for low-tech methods for forcing Belgian endive. I'll show you the process and how it turned out in the end, and maybe you can learn a thing or two about growing Belgian endive on your farm or in your garden. This beautiful stand of Belgian endive was seeded for after the frost date. They came up beautifully, and then I thinned them. This is a 5-row bed, and I thinned them down to 3-inch spacing, but I would give them much more space doing this again, and I'd shoot for a sunnier plot. They grew all right considering, although the end result is a little bit small on the roots. This is August 4th, and by then the greens were big and luscious, and the roots were still pretty tiny. Naturally, they have to grow a long season before they get big. And then come the fall is when the roots are big enough to dig. So this is October, and I've dug some roots and graded them for size. I have plenty of little ones, a few big ones, and some mediums to try my hand at forcing them in the grow chamber. But this is what you want them to look like, and that's what you're shooting for. So you'd trim off those green leaves for storage, but make sure not to cut below the growing point. So in October I only dug one of the beds, so here's me coming back in January. We have a window of warm-ish weather to dig the rest of them that seem to have not been killed. So I'm digging those up and getting them out of the ground so I can try forcing those ones too. So here I am with all the last of the endives in the field. It's the end of January, and these guys have gone through that crazy cold we had where it was negative temps and the ground was frozen for weeks. So these ones went through the cold period in the field, unlike the ones I dug in October, which were a little bit bigger and went through that cold snap in the safety of the cooler. So it was in the 30s in there. These ones are pretty small. This was kind of it's not my best plot. It's north facing, and then in the summertime these locust trees have lots of leaves on them. So yeah, not good sun exposure, great soil, but nonetheless they're pretty small, and that's okay. Some of the experiments I'm doing with the small ones look pretty promising too. They're still making really beautiful blonde colored greens, so they might not be full endive football shaped ones, but they'll probably yield something interesting to go into some of the mixes that I do, but we'll see. I might be wrong. I guess I should hold out some hope. But that's the last of the endives out here, and we'll get them into storage and start forcing them for spring market sales. So today is February 20th, and I'm pulling my chicory root out of the cooler, and I'm going to start soaking and forcing it because my market season will be starting soon. My favorite innovation so far is that these shopping baskets fit really nicely inside of these roughneck totes. So I will be stuffing the basket full of the root and then putting water in the tote, and then putting them in a little dark area in my greenhouse. Ironically, in my greenhouse, I don't have a lot of space to do this, but this will be the container that it goes in to the dark for, let's say, 3 weeks until harvest. So let me show you these. I dug them, in the fall. There is a bit of mold on some of the roots. That's one of them. When I dug them, I also graded them for size. So there's like this whammy in there, which is no doubt going to produce like an amazing head. And then obviously some I cut below the growing point, so that is not going to work. But they're making these little sprouts just in the cooler in the dark. So let's see what happens. I'm gonna trim them up so they fit evenly into the tote, and then go from there. So I put those totes under the bench on the left side of my greenhouse there. They're in there, and I used the black landscape fabric to try and block out a lot of the light, but I think it only blocked out about 80%, so I decided inverted tote over top would help get the rest of the light out. After about 10 days, this is what they looked like. I felt like they were so green because the light was leaking in, so I tried to keep them even more in the dark. And you can compare those ones to a little experiment I did on my heated benches earlier in the winter. They grew really fast and kind of looked a little bit different. Also just under landscape fabric there. A few of those dark edges are kind of bad spots on the leaves, but with that second batch, it was March 17th, and I decided it was time to harvest and bring them to market. Although they were smaller than I'd hoped, they put down lots of beautiful white roots, and I decided to cut them above the growing point and package them in clamshells like this to give people a little taste of what Belgian endive grown locally was like. So this was my first try at growing Belgian endive, and I definitely learned a lot. Hopefully you learned a little bit too by seeing some of my process and mistakes along the way, but I look forward to giving it another try this season using Treviso tardivo.